Hello, everyone. My name is Dina, and I am a software engineer in Expedia. I've been working with SLO for the last 3 years. Before we start, I want to ask how many of you is working with SLO now? Okay, good number. So just to make sure that everyone in this room is on the same page, I just want to go through the concept that we are here, which is like what is SLI, SLO, and SLA. SLI, which is the service level indicator, measure the service status, the status that is provided by the service for a customer. The SLO, which is the service level objective, which is the target or the value that we want our service to be running or operating at, and is usually measured by the SLIs. And the SLA, the service level agreement, which is the agreement by the service provider that they're going to operate or give us a service at a certain level. And if they don't do that, usually depending on the agreement we have with them, they can pay us a fine. And that's why we heard like a lot of big companies, they have 99.9 and 0.99. Today, I'm going to start talking to you about our journey in Expedia, how we were able to accelerate from dozens of SLOs to thousands. And we have a lot. And most of you know that Expedia is a big group, a big organization. We have multiple domains, multiple observability and logging tools, multiple application, like thousands of applications, and a big engineering team. Asking big engineering team, like with different applications, thousands of these applications to create SLO is going to be a very big task. 3 years ago, before we started with this project or program, we had a very small set of SLO that they were calculated in-house from different teams. Then they were stored in different databases, and they were used specific for a certain domain or a certain teams. Until one day, our management, they said they wanted to understand how Expedia is doing and what is our status in terms of availability, for example. And this is when we knew that we need to have an SLO per service. And when we start looking around, we couldn't find an in-house program or in-house code that can expand to this amount of services that we have and give us what we want, which is the full coverage of availability within Expedia. Luckily, in 2021, we started to adopt to Datadog more and more. And SLO capability was expanding in Datadog, and we wanted to take advantage of that. And we were thinking that after we start using Datadog for SLO, they will do the calculation, we will create SLO there for the services that we have, and then we will have a full coverage for availability. So we came as a group, and we start asking ourselves, what can we do to increase adoption for SLO within Expedia? So we wanted few stuff to do that, and we start thinking, okay, we want a tool that is easy to be used by engineers. A tool shouldn't be fancy, something simple because we want to be fast a little bit. The tool should be able to create SLO using APIs. Datadog has that. And we wanted to, what type of SLOs that we want to create, right? Because the industry has different types of SLOs. So we said, okay, we wanted to create SLO availability as a start and SLO latency, focusing on availability. But again, what means availability and what does this mean latency? When we start discussing this with different groups, especially the groups that were creating SLOs before, everyone has their own different definition or configuration. And then we said, okay, let's start simple. Let's start with availability as a total good event divided by total event. But again, what means of total good events? Some teams, for example, they don't put 400 HTTP code in the good event. They consider them as a bad event. But we said to make it simplify and to move forward quicker, we said, okay, let's do the total good event, only accepting without the 500. And this was our simple availability SLO, which is the total good event without the 500 divided by the total event. And then we came back to the latency. What latency means, which I guess most of us know, the time that takes to for the service to respond for a request. So we said, okay, for that we need to have a threshold. And this threshold, how can we calculate it? So we said, okay, let's get all the latency, average latency with P95 in the last 24 hours only. And then we pick the maximum number. And then we create the SLO based on that, just to make things quicker. Create the SLO. And then once we create it, the team can review it and tune it if it's wrong. We decided to use P95. So this was for what types of SLO to be created. Then we wanted to understand what services we want to create SLO for. We have type of services that are databases, streaming, HTTP. We said, okay, let's focus now on the HTTP services and use the APM REST because this is what is available for us. So we create a template SLO. I will use this word a little bit more in the presentation. So we create an SLO template based on APM REST. And then as we are starting fresh, we had this amazing idea. It was like, what about make SLO as a code? So we'll store the SLOs in the team's GitHub repos. And so if anything happened, we still have a source code for the SLO if any changes happening in the future. And we want, if anyone use our tool over and over, we don't want to create a multiple SLOs, right? We want to create them once. And if it's created, we don't recreate them. So we put a standardizing for certain tags that each SLO needs to have, like service, environment, and SLI type. So these were the standards that we said that we need to have them. So people don't regenerate or recreate SLOs. And this is what we create, our first version, iteration for creating an SLO, which we call it a generator. The customer will come, will provide us with a service name to the SLO generator. Then it will check with Datadog if the APM matrix exists. Then after that, we will create with the SLO template a JSON file that we will open a PR on the service GitHub. Then we will wait for the team to review it, approve it, and then merge it. And once it's merged, what we will do, we will create it through the APIs on Datadog. And voila, we said, okay, we're ready. This is how we're going to create thousands of SLOs in Expedia. And of course, with this tool, we were making sure that when all the SLOs that are created that have the standards that we put from tags, and as well we make it as a mandatory as well to have error budget alerts. So everything that is around the SLO will be created with this tool for the SLO part. So once this tool went live, we start to work on promoting it. We start to explain, oh, this is the easiest way for you to create SLOs. And we start making workshops, sharing knowledge, knowledge sharing sessions, and we set up as well office hours. For the workshop, we said, okay, we took from a different team from a different organization within Expedia to create something called SLO champions. We took them for 2-3 hours. We explained all the terminology because as well we have a lag and we didn't have the culture about SLO within Expedia. Explain to them what is SLO, how they can use it in their sprint and their OKRs to convince management that our availability is not good. We need to work on making it better. And then we create SLO for some of their services. The knowledge sharing session were presentation style. We will have 20 to 30 minutes working with the team. We explain all the concept. At that time, in 2021, 2022, the SLO concepts were not very good in the industry and in Expedia as well. So we were trying to work on the culture to make sure that all the engineers understand what SLO is and how they can use it in their daily work. And then we set up as well an office hours where we will have a one-to-one interaction with teams to help them to create SLO and understand what's happening and how to create their SLO. So it was very good success for us in this term. But unfortunately, we have some challenges in this version. The first challenge is that we noticed that users are still able to create and modify SLOs on Datadog directly, which will make whatever is in the GitHub is out of sync. So, and in some cases, it's invalid, and if they do a wrong merge, we will lose whatever we have on the GitHub in Datadog. The second challenge was if the teams didn't merge the PRs as fast as we expect them. We were expecting team to just review it, approve it, and then merge it. But we noticed that the average merge for the PR was almost 2 weeks plus. And this was a big setback for us, and we didn't know what to do here. The third challenge was what's interesting. We assumed that most of the HTTP services are using APM REST, but then we noticed like a lot of teams, they come back to us, was like, sorry, we cannot use your tool. Your tool is replying, sorry, we cannot create SLO because our template doesn't support what metrics they have in Datadog. So we came back as a group, and we did another deep dive, and we said, OK, let's solve these issues. So we did first fix. The first fix, we created something called SLO sync. So we start listening to whatever happening on Datadog for changes on Datadog for the SLO specifically. So if you create an SLO, or modified your SLO on Datadog, we were able to trace it back and then check what you have on your GitHub. And if there's any changes, we open another PR. The second fix was because the teams who were unable to create SLO using our templates, we start understanding what other metrics we can create SLO with. And then we noticed that we can add multiple other templates like APM gRPC, API Netty, and USM. And this was one of our biggest win in these fixes, where we had a feedback loop. The third fix, we start to build different type of workshops. We start having a self-service workshop that are in our learning portal within Expedia. Make sure and reach out to team to make them understand what SLO means. And we had a very good SLO documentation, and we outreach with this documentation with self-serve to different teams. And fantastic. Now we solved all the problems. This is what we thought at this point. We were unable to achieve our adoption targets, which we have to have all the HTTP service having SLO. Looking again on this whole structure, you can see how complex it is. We were still having a problem of merging the PR on GitHub. Even though we tried sending emails, like we start checking which PRs are not merged, ping the team by email, ping the teams by Slack messages, try to convince them why you like try to talk to them even one-to-one sometimes, but this wasn't scalable, of course. So we thought like our most problem here is that our thoughts like, okay, teams are going proactively merge the PR, and the PR merge maybe will take 1 day, 2 day max. But no, some PRs were not even touched or like even merged. So, and we start thinking, what is the value here that we are gaining of having the SLO in a JSON file in GitHub? Especially by that time, we start to know that Datadog start to have audit trail. So if any changes happen on SLO in Datadog, we can trace it back and we can revert it. So technically, maybe we don't need to have the SLO JSON on GitHub. And this is when we start saying, OK, let's remove this requirement. It's not needed now, especially that we want to adopt thousands of SLO. And this is a very big obstacle for us. So now I present you the generator version 3. We remove the requirement of having SLO JSON file on your GitHub. Or what you have to do here is to give this tool only your service name. Then it will create directly after 2 to 3 minutes the SLO on Datadog, and will appear in Datadog after 5 minutes. And this capability for us opened a lot of doors for us. We were able to create here thousands of SLOs without even talking to the teams directly on Datadog. And what we did in this case, we start creating 100 for the critical application, then go back to them, we show them the data, this is what we created, are you guys happy? And everyone was happy. Just they didn't want to create to merge the PRs before because it could trigger a release on their application. So this was our final iteration for the generator, where we created thousands of SLO, as I said. And after the team starts seeing the data, more teams start to come to us, like data stores team. They were like, can you please help us? Can you create SLOs for us? And then what we did is, again, through the feedback loop for the template, we had a team. We understand what SLO they need. And then we created a template. We added to the generator. And again, we were able to ship hundreds of applications for data store and streaming as well. And whoever come to us with a different use case, we just add a template on the SLO generator and create as much as we want from the SLOs on Datadog. And this is when we came to start to think that, okay, we have a lot of data now. We have a lot of SLOs on Datadog. And here our focus started to shift because our adoption rate by that time was almost maybe 95%. I was like, okay, we have data. We can see it on Datadog. We have some problems we need to focus on as well and report upon. And so it's like, okay, what can we do now? And this is when we start looking into the reporting. What we did with the reporting, the same framework, we added something called SLO pull. We start pulling the data as it is with the SLI values, and we store them in the database. And then we were able as well to enrich this data with our internal metadata from the application tier, the application owner, the application leader, and the organization. And that we were able to create multiple types of reporting. Report per leader, report for department, and every leader and department were able to check what is their performance review, performance. For example, how is their SLI availability, how is their SLI latency. And then we were able to surface that as well internally by having trends. Sadly, I picked up a wrong example that everything is green, but you can see the concept is that if something goes red, it will show that on this day or in this week, something happened. So the leaders will be like asking why, did we have an incident? If there's no incident reported, why? And then we start looking into that. And this is when our focus now in Expedia has shifted, not only for adoption, but to keep these SLOs as well relative to day-to-day work and fresh and correct. And we start to notice as well, because we have now thousands of SLOs, and people are able to create sometimes SLO directly on Datadog. Not everyone is following the standards, and we don't have a consistency sometimes in SLOs. And this is when we start saying, okay, we need governance on top of that. So we created a program called SLO governance, where we start to check the SLO data or the stuff that's happening on SLO, like simple one. We start simple. Do you have the tags, which we defined before, the service, the environment, and the SLI type? If you don't have them, we flag you. Do you have the target set correctly? At that time, our management wanted the target to be 99.9. So if you set up your target anything like for 80, 90s or something, we will flag you as red because we want your target to be 99.9. And if you're any lower, it means that you have to work on availability and you have to report it to the management. And this is how the management will give you time to work on it. The data here, we start to notice that some teams, sometimes if they create SLO per endpoint, some endpoint retire, but they forgot to delete the SLO, or the SLO is not relative, so they need to delete it. And the error budget remaining. If people are consuming more error budget than what they have, it means that they are going into minus, and they have to be aware that they need to do a better job of what they're doing in making the error budget lower. And then we start noticing more patterns from the team when we start talking to them. And this is when we start looking more and more into something called SLO quality. The quality is like a step above the SLO governance, where we start looking if your application has an incident, but your SLO didn't get affected, it's still green. How this is possible? Like, if there's something wrong, it means that either the SLO configuration is wrong, or what even our application created is wrong, and we need to review and fix it, or there's something else wrong, that we are not reporting the right metrics, for example, on Datadog and so on. So this was one of the stuff we start looking at in the SLO quality. Another example as well, we noticed that if your error budget has been 100 for the last 6 months, it means that, again, something is wrong in how we are reporting about your SLO. We're still working now on making the SLO that we are working on to have better quality. We're noticing different patterns. Another pattern we noticed, the SLO latency that we've been using. I don't know if you know about Datadog SLO latency. Usually it's a monitor base. But we realized that if we used it as a metric base for our use cases in Expedia, it's better. And it shows a better, a better view where the latency is lower or higher. So these are the little tweaks that we are doing now in Expedia. And this is our journey on how we did, and we reached to thousands of SLO. I don't know if I was quick, but I'm done. I'm happy to take now questions.
Hello. Here you go.
So we use SLOs too, but we heavily engage with our product group. How do you engage with your product group to help determine the SLOs for the applications and service?
You mean Datadog? So we have bi-weekly meetings with them. Our products meetings, so what happened, like we started together with them, and now whenever we ask them for help, we add that to their product. We as well ask them at some point to have more help to enhance the culture. So they delivered few workshops for us related to SLO. And we work hard, like for example, as well, we asked them once to, if an application doesn't have an SLO, you can right-click on Datadog UI and create an SLO. We give them the templates that we want. So this is how our interaction with Datadog.
Hi.
Hi.
At our company, we've also done something similar, and we were running into issues as well, trying to keep, I think, keeping things dry and keeping things paired with the service, with the MRs and things. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. So like when you made the decision to not try to keep the SLO code with the service code, for example, right? And just push everything into Datadog, I definitely saw the pro of that approach, which is you got your SLOs built out. What were some downsides from that approach? Like, namely, my concern would be, how do you keep track of, we have X and X services that are being spun up, but they're not, we don't have the SLOs for them.
Yeah, so if you remember the slide of the APM the SLO templates, so we decided that we would remove the SLO JSON in GitHub because we believe that if someone remove everything on Datadog from SLO, we should be able to recreate it ourselves through the templates. And this is how our belief came. And especially that Datadog as well have the audit trail. We said if, for example, in like red code happened with Datadog that we don't have any access to SLO, we should be able to take this archive back and recreate them again. So this is what we did. And you can see, like, because we're using templates, it's hard code, like we have a code for them. We believe that it's simple to recreate them. Plus, not all the applications that we are supporting are using custom metrics. So we have this another problem that some users are using custom metrics, but we don't, the percentage is not very high. Yeah.
Hello. I was curious about the number of SLOs that you created. Is that each one of those SLOs is mapped to a feature, or are are you able to aggregate those SLOs together to monitor a specific feature?
So we are currently creating SLO per service. We have another track to create them per user flow, for example. And then we aggregate them per, like the reports that is happening now is per service under certain leader, because we want to understand where should we put the investment and so on. But of course, if you have, for example, per endpoint, per the flow, you can easily create the flow of the SLO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Earlier, you showed the hierarchy of SLIs feed into SLOs, and those inform SLAs. I was just wondering about that final process of now that you've made a bajillion SLOs, have those informed SLAs? And do you go back to product teams and say, here are all like your SLOs performing at, like what is your end goal?
Yeah, so it's a very funny story, I would say, because what's happening, like we have a lot of teams that were like, I want to exclude my downstream. Like my SLO is breaching, and now because within Expedia as well, we have like something called production ready from Google concept. So we are trying to flag the people who are breaching their SLOs. So some people, they're trying to say, oh, it's not my problem, it's my downstream problem. But again, if it's your downstream, your product person needs to talk to the other product person and agree on a service level, right, which is the SLA internally. And some teams like, no, this is not happening. We need to, for example, we need to deliver something now for production. We cannot do that. But we are trying. The problem is the culture, and you have to push for it, and you have to have the backup from your leadership to make sure that they understand that this is how we should say no, and this is how they need to fix it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for me, whenever I see the question, I just answer like, you have to make your product person talk to the other person. And because we have a set target from Expedia 99.9, no one can say my SLA, for example, or SLO is 80. It's not acceptable. So it's a bit easier when we have the discussion internally.
So Expedia does have an overall SLA, and then
No, SLA is like when you have a between clients, right? But internally, our aim to have SLO, which is the target for us, is 99.9.
per service.
Per service, yeah.
Okay.
Which is, if you do the math, sometimes it's impossible, but we're hoping to reach there.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
And it's related to SLOs and user impact. Like a problem that we have with latency is that you can, with Datadog, you might think that you suddenly get a lot of high latency traffic, but if it's just impacting one person, are you actually 99.9% available or less? Do you track user impact at all?
By user key, yes, sometimes. It depends on the use case. But in our templates, we don't put it because it doesn't cover the whole. But we encourage, like what we did in the last year, we had an SRE teams for different departments, and we used to review them and sometimes manually to make sure that teams are doing better.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kind of a similar cultural question for you. So we're just at the beginning of our SLO journey, and it sounds like you had some leadership support, which is great in getting those SLOs up and running, and also the support of like, if we don't meet our SLO, we need to stop and address that. We have some leaders that understand that that's important and some that don't. So I'm just curious what your process was like, because it sounds like you had a lot of different organizations that you had to kind of get on board with seeing the value of SLOs from the beginning to be able to stand this up.
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting question. It's a culture problem, which has different aspects and layers. I think for the leaders, mostly we explain to them the value, and I feel like because as well the developers and the engineer were useful, like they were happy to show that they have a problem. So sometimes it's used to happen from down to top and top to down. So I would encourage to talk and show the data. And once they, like a leadership doesn't want to show his availability is 80, while the other leadership is like 90, right? So it's like,
Right.
it's like I'm red, he's green, I need to do better. So yeah, I would say show the data in a report and then let them lead
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a very similar sentiment as well. I'm also struggling with adoption right now. And it's, how did you get to the point where when the data store team came by and said, hey, can you make us SLOs? How did you transition them from asking you to make it for you instead of pushing them to do it for themselves?
So as we said in the product or the SLO generator, at the end, we pulled all the services and we auto-generate. So they would have the SLO on Datadog. Some teams, of course, we needed their help because they were user custom metrics. We couldn't create them through the templates. But it was like once, I feel like in these specific, because the engineering teams at the moment, they have a lot of requests from different teams. And sometimes it's something they don't interest them. They don't want to know what SLO. They don't want to create SLO because they have feature to deliver for certain track. So once we created for them, and then our observability teams and like different teams start using it for reports, and then they start to see the value of it. They start using it. But sometimes you have to keep them aware, but you cannot depend on them doing it, if I'm making sense. If you have a big team, sometimes you have to do it yourself.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. We've done something kind of similar to yourselves in that we have automated these SLOs for teams on a per service basis. So we have went from 0 to around 1,000 SLOs like overnight. But we have found that some of the teams have actually given us pushback saying that that's not specific enough for them and they would prefer to have SLOs on a resource level, like at a specific endpoint. Our problem with that is there are 160,000 resources, and in my opinion, that's just too many SLOs to manage. What's your opinion on that? Do you think service level is okay, or should you go more granular?
Yeah, so it's very, very good questions, because when we create our generator, we start to have two ways of doing it. Either you can do it by service level or by endpoint. And when you select the endpoint, you would create multiple endpoints, by endpoint, SLO by endpoint. And of course, when we did the auto-generate, or like when we create like massive amount of SLOs, we just select the service level. But then we realized, I guess Datadog updated one of their features where you can divide it, or we discovered it, I cannot remember, just by resource name. So we'll have one SLO for the service, but inside, when you open the page, it will have by resource name, by endpoint, sorry. And then you will be able to check which endpoint is causing the problem. Again, there's another problem with this, is that when you have a high traffic endpoint and low traffic endpoint, if a low traffic endpoint has a problem, it will flag the whole SLO red, while the high traffic one, it won't. But in that feature, when we used it, I guess it was covering, but then we start to have a conversation with the team. Do you want the admin endpoint to be in a high traffic service? And that's why, as I said before, we had like as well a program where we have different type of, not different type, an SRE team per organization. And we had like 10 steps. We called them review your SLO or review your alerts and stuff. And then we used to go through each, of course, I'm talking only about the critical application. And we used to go one by one. And we used to flag, oh, you have a problem. I can see that your latency threshold is very high. Why? Can you reduce it? And so on. It was a bit manual, but we automate a lot of these to make them, bash scripting and so on. We enhanced a lot on that. And again, in the SLO quality program that we are working on, we are trying to make it better. So even sometimes like again, another funny story, like, teams we will have in the query environment prod, but they will tag it environment lab. So this is as well something wrong. So this is the stuff we were trying to figure out. But you need to see the pattern to know how your team is working.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is going to be the last question for this session, so we can turn the room over for the next speaker.
Dashboards. What does your SLO dashboard look like if you have thousands? And is the dashboard auto-generated through the generator?
No, we pull the data, we put them in the data store, as I said. And then on top of that, we have a Tableau.
Oh, okay. So you don't use Datadog to report?
Datadog was able to implement what we wanted later. But because sometimes we need, certain information about the application, like tiers or leadership, and sometimes the problem with these specific information change from time to time. So sometimes, I don't know how the sync with Datadog is happening, so we were depending mostly on Tableau. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.